Minnesota Original is made possible by the State Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
On this edition of Minnesota Original, Patrick's Cabaret founder, Patrick Scully, performs an excerpt from his one-man show, Thrive.
Society and the police.
He immigrated to the U.S. after the Cold War. Russian contemporary artist Oleg Vassiliev explores memory and light. And hip-hop duo Kill the Vultures performs. These artists and more, now on Minnesota Original.
I'm Patrick Scully, dancer and performance artist and the founder of Patrick's Cabaret. Cabaret is a performance venue here in South Minneapolis. It serves local artists as they develop new work. The idea is to create an accessible, friendly space for local artists to work in. And in particular, I've reached out to other GLBT and queer-identified artists, as well as artists of color and people with disabilities. I'm proud to say that Patrick's Cabaret celebrated its 25th anniversary. Recently, I performed Thrive, a piece that looks back over the last 25 years, starting with the day that I found out that I'm HIV positive. The piece chronicles the highs and lows as I look at both very personal events and global affairs. We're able to see how much society has changed and how far we still have to go. In the segment that you're about to see, we look at the heady first days in this space here on Minnehaha Avenue in 1999. 1999 was a very good year. We got this building in 1999. I felt like I won the lottery. Through the generosity of the fairy godmother, we had a 20-year lease for $1 a month. One of the first things I did was find somebody who could climb the flagpole and put up a rainbow flag. For the first time in my life, I experienced pride in flying a flag. Right next door to the police. And our flag was bigger and taller than theirs. In this case, size did matter. And on the inside here, the first thing we did was build a world-class dance floor. I remember looking at the beauty of the bare wood after it had been sanded. It was so sensuous. The hues were the same as the color of my skin. So Tim Johnson came and videotaped me as I rolled naked from one end of the room to the other. One last dance of my naked flesh and the bare wood before we clothed the floor with polyurethane.
Well, they say, you know, it's progress.
The police next door, they make for interesting neighbors. Now, this is not the police department of my youth. Say, 1979 in Minneapolis, you would not have been able to open a gay theater in a building next door to the police. You'd have had city inspectors stopping by every hour on the hour looking for a reason to close down your establishment. Fortunately, society and the police department have evolved. As Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We even had a lesbian precinct commander in charge next door. Led to a classic confrontation between lesbian law and order and radical fairy freedom of speech. And the First Amendment won. But I digress. I actually took a great deal of pride being able to establish this as a gay cultural landmark in South Minneapolis. On Friday night in May of 1999, we held our first performance in this space. The room was packed with people. We were no longer just surviving, we were thriving. And Saturday morning, I got in the car and drove up to Brainerd to my father's funeral. I learned something important that weekend about the enormous capacity of the human heart. Its ability to hold that much sorrow and that much joy, all at the same time.
Say the progress begins with you.
My name is Maren Kloppmann. I'm a ceramic artist. I work in porcelain. I was trained as a potter originally. I have been making functional pots for many years. Through years of training, I was really inspired to expand my repertoire, and my work developed eventually to push beyond the boundaries of what functional pottery is and blur the boundaries between craft, design, and fine art. One of the things in this exhibition is I absolutely love this wall. My husband is Mark Wheat, who is the evening host on 89.3 The Current.
And when people ask me if I'm an artist, I say, yeah, I sculpt sound. These ones actually are lighter than they look. Literally, it's maybe only a pound because they're pillows. They're light, they're fluffy, they're hollow.
Enclosing a space and opening a space. So I'm really trying to create accessibility by opening it up, at least in a very minimal way. This is my studio space and gallery. I grew up in northern Germany. At age 11, we moved to Bavaria. When I graduated from high school, I started a 3-year apprenticeship. 3 years later, at age 22, came to the United States to visit some relatives and eventually settled here in Minneapolis to go to graduate school and get my MFA.
Maren Kloppmann, a ceramic artist who I've known for a number of years now, working completely differently than I do, but one of the very exciting artists of our area.
Over the years, I have shown throughout this country as well as in Germany and in Australia. I have pieces in the permanent collection at the Weizmann Art Museum, at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, at the Minnesota Historical Society, as well as Northern Clay Center. So in general, the feel of the gallery is to keep things visually light and airy, and keep a minimalist emphasis in terms of the aesthetic, which I think best underlines my work. An example of that would be this piece, which is a large-scale coil-built vessel. It is this point where everything comes to. It comes to it structurally, and it comes to it by mimicking the contrasting yellow and black. They're all visually, subconsciously come to this place. Explaining all of this is very complex in its detail, but in its presentation and how it affects is very simple. In the back here is the studio space, and this is where all the dust and all the dirt happens. My wheel, that's an old traditional treadle wheel, which runs just with manpower, without electricity. So what I love about this is there's no sound. It's a meditative aspect about this. Pottery is not about stress, about multitasking. And this wheel, put in motion by moving my leg, brings that all to me. So I use these to get this really smooth surface, what we call metal ribs. This curve has been shaped into the tool by using it over, 15 years. That's obviously a curve I push into the clay. That shape there, right, it fits in there. The other type of material I love using with clay is wood. They almost become like what washes up on a beach. I love the feel of it in my hands, but that's important. It's you and your tools and your material. That's what it comes down to. Porcelain refers to the fact that it's a primary clay that has no organic impurities where it's found and mined. Slabs are used in my work to drape over molds. So the slab roller is almost like a printing press. These are my molds. They are partially made out of styrofoam. They are partially made out of plaster. The pillows that I use for my wall installations, they are also built out of slabs. You just pick up the slab and lay it on the mold by hand. This is how a dinner plate would start.
She's very, very intense about what she's doing, you know. Although she's repeating forms again and again, they're never the same.
This has been drying since yesterday afternoon, so this would be a dinner plate. I would cut along that line and split the plate in half. And this is how the plate would become a half a pillow. We're at the glazing process, and these pieces at this point, they've been through the first process of firing, so it can absorb glaze in a liquid form. I use liquid wax to mark shapes on the piece. This will be black and this will be golden yellow. I fire all my work in an electric kiln. This kiln can fire to 2300 degrees, which is kind of a standard high fire temperature for stoneware and porcelain. Having just moved into this new facility is a really most wonderful gift. Working as an artist simply informs and feeds the work that you do.
I think this is my favorite piece in the show. When she came into the space, reacting to the space and what it was going to go with, she decided to paint what she calls this shellac. This is kind of a signature color that's on the wall in her studio. So it's almost like bringing the piece out of the studio, but it has some of the feel of her studio in it too. It is so simple, but it's really tough to figure out how she figured that out. That it's such a simple break in the color distribution, but it creates a really interesting pattern in and of itself. I mean, the whole thing looks like it's dancing on the wall.
Maren has embraced this exactness and hard-edged relationship of forms and carried it to an extent where it has become far greater than most people who work in that manner.
I love touching it too, because when people come into a studio, obviously around porcelain, the word porcelain freaks everyone out and they like, you know, hold him back. But the thing about her pieces are they're so sensual because she spends a lot of time getting them really, really smooth. The glazes are smooth, and so they feel great too. So I always try and encourage people to touch the art because it's really sexy.
Это один из островов Соловецкого архипелага.
So the White Sea is close to the Arctic Circle, and there is a small island there, the island of Anzor. It was in the mid-1960s. And there on that island, probably due to this northern diffuse light, the way it's in the north, he realized that the earth and everything on it is actually very small. And there is this ocean of light that the earth is bathed in. And then he remembered the words of his teacher, Favorsky, who said, art is very important, art is great. There is something that is bigger than art. And he thinks that on that small island in the White Sea, he had some kind of an epiphany, a revelation, and his independent painting started from that moment. My name is Maria Zavyalova. I'm curator at the Museum of Russian Art in Minneapolis. Oleg Vassiliev is a Russian artist who now lives in Minnesota. He belongs to the generation of unofficial artists of the 1960s and 70s. He joined the underground scene in the late 50s, so he was at the inception. Unofficial artists were unofficial because they were critical of the Soviet situation around them. They wanted to work with the Soviet cultural stereotypes and also criticize them. Some of the artists began to experiment, and experimentation was out of the question at that time. Oleg Vassiliev belongs to that group of artists who were not overtly critical of the regime, but the way they painted and the way they experimented with art was already a political statement. Oleg's early work is quite different. He went through several periods. He did some engravings in the style of Favorsky, his teacher. Then in the 1960s, he began to create these energetic flows of pure colors, warm to cool, around objects that he would try to place in the middle of the painting. And then he began to combine very detailed elements with his spectral theories of pictorial space.
Оно мыслится, но не обязательно его фиксировать.
Technically speaking, every painting, Oleg can create a model, an abstract model. So this is the painting he's working on, and this was one of the ideas.
Это я мучился, он так и не вышел.
But he thinks it
Получается неправда какая-то нарочитая, неестественно немного.
There is
А мне не хотелось этого.
unnatural about the way he structured this space, so he switched
потому
to
что
a
можно
different one.
отступиться, но
Oleg's work is very interesting in the way he works with several theories of the construction of pictorial space, and according to one of them, there are three kinds of pictorial space that you work with: the high space, deep space, and combined space. And he also works with the different ways of representing this space through a combination of cool and warm colors that creates a sort of a movement and energy around the painting. Space and Nature is a painting where you can see his combined space, like deep space and high space coexisting in the center of the painting, and you can feel that the overall pictorial space is twisted there. There is this whirl, tornado of energy going through the center. Also, one of his more general ideas about art is that whatever you paint, these visual impressions are really very fleeting. They are passing, quick. And the light that they are bathed in is permanent. It is constant, like the earth that is, rotating around the sun in this powerful flow of sunlight and sun energy. So this is an important idea for him. That's why his paintings combine these very precise, detailed visual impressions of real life and the spectral flow of light. One of the paintings that really impressed me the moment I saw it is his Memory of Kira. That's the painting that he started soon after his wife passed away, and you can feel her presence still lingering there. Kira is placed in this white circle of light that is trying to push her out, but he's still walking away into that light from us. And there is this ocean in the background, so it's a wonderful painting. Since coming to America, Oleg's work did not change a lot. Even though it will take a future art historian to look at the body of his work created here, he says that he has not changed his style or his technique. Oleg says a Russian artist is always a Russian artist, and that's how he feels about himself.
Поэтому вот в этой встрече что-то
He says that in some of his paintings he achieves this moment of life flying away or flying through the painting, like this passing, fleeting moment within the light that is permanent.
Reverend revivalists pulls them out they mishaps. As long as the bridle fits, you're sure to hear the whip crack. Thank the lepers with colonial feathers. Tell Sharp Knife Jackson the winter got weather. Never walk with the lost folks who talk to the air with machines to their ears, but really nobody's there. Keep your John Hancock off faulty peace treaty. Many Colonel Shivingtons like to Harry Houdini. Off the record, your old man's running on static. Sometimes my flesh lets chemicals have at it. You wouldn't believe waters of people have walked. Some sank, some drank, dark oceans they crossed. It is not our nature to nurture the vapors of a savior who promises land for our labor. Put your best foot forward when you walk across the border. Either came cause voices told you to, or cause you flipped a quarter. Landed heads up, hit the highway, the holy ribbon. Only given is the dead trucks littered with lonely women. Smoky vision blurs, tears come shaking me something fearsome. Reminds me of another life when I was 20 years young. Peering out Venetian blinds, don't let me be the crime. If I don't see it, fine, I'll lean behind a drugstore, peace of mind. Man, they don't know y'all from a South Dakota landscape. Bulletproof glass and intercoms separate that handshake. Can't escape with drifters, dusters, his to carry. Obituary columns, nothing but a rustic vision buried. Military tags and medicine bags hold the offering. The doctor brings amphetamine drags to slow you properly. I tell my children they can walk on water. Our folks prefer walking on fire for fire water now. I tell my children they can walk on water. Smooth talkers always tend to lead the lamb to the slaughter. I tell my children they can walk on water. Our folks prefer walking on fire for fire water now. I tell my children they can walk on water. Watch the hand they keep hidden when they're making an offer. Now the triggermen tally Roman numeral marks while the bagpipes blow, police funerals march. But it's just another story on the cold observatory. Heard the prisoner banging rocks produced a beautiful spark. I tell my children they can walk on water. Our folks prefer walking on fire for fire water now. I tell my children they can walk on water. Watch the hand they keep hidden when they're making an offer. I tell my children they can walk on water. Your folks prefer walking on fire for fire water now. I tell my children they can walk on water. Watch the hand they keep hidden when they're making an offer. Watch it. I tell my children they can. 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 I tell my children they can.
The architecture is key because when you're talking about vessel, it is a vessel, but it's not self-supporting. They could come off as obelisks in a kind of abstract sculptural way. It's always been a dream of hers to be a self-supporting studio artist that has work in a fine art gallery. So to see that happen over the last 5 years and to feel like I'm a part of it, giving her an emotional safety net, if nothing else, is what I'm most proud of in my life right now.
Having our passion as our work,
right,
and life itself, the boundary is completely fluid. Our social life is really going to events that connect in some way or another to the work we do.
Minnesota Original is made possible by the State Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.